The sun sank behind the hills, painting the sky in red and gold. The city gates still burned, smoke rising high into the air. The smell of iron and dust filled the field where the soldiers rested after the long battle. Broken shields and fallen banners covered the ground. Men spoke in low voices, tending to the wounded, while others sat in silence, too tired to speak at all. Captain Ethan Cole moved through the wreckage, his armor stained with dirt and ash. His right arm burned from a cut he had taken in the fight, but he did not stop. He was not only a soldier, but also a healer. He had bandaged many wounds that to friends, strangers, even those who had once fought against him. But now, someone called him to the central tent. The tone of the messenger's voice made his heart beat faster. "The Queen," the young guard said breathlessly. "She has been hurt." Ethan followed without a word. He had seen Queen Leora before, but only from a distance. She always rode at the front lines, her banner held high, her voice steady even when arrows darkened the sky. Many said she was not made of the same softness most rulers had. She was strong, proud, and untamed like the wild horse she rode into every battle. When Ethan entered the royal tent, the smell of herbs and blood mixed in the air. The queen lay on a bed made of furs and linen, her armor half removed. Her royal advisors stood near the doorway, worried but afraid to come closer. 2 guards knelt beside her, pressing a cloth to her side where dark blood had soaked through. "Stand aside," Ethan said firmly but gently. His voice carried not the tone of command, but of certainty. The guards hesitated, unsure if they should allow him near the queen. Then she moved her hand slightly, signaling them to step away. Ethan knelt beside her. For a moment, he forgot he was before a monarch. He saw only a woman pale with pain, her lips tight, her eyes blazing with the stubborn fire she had shown on the battlefield. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "may I treat your wound?" Her voice was quiet but steady. "Do what must be done." Ethan lifted the edge of her tunic and looked at the wound. A deep gash ran across her ribs, bleeding freely. The blade that had cut her was sharp, but it had missed the vital organs by a small margin. Still, it could be deadly if left untended. He took water and cloth, washing the wound as gently as he could. The queen did not cry out, though her hands gripped the sheets tight. Her breath came slow and sharp. Think outside the tent, the sounds of distant fires and faint trumpets told of soldiers gathering their dead. Inside, there was only the quiet rhythm of her breath and Ethan's steady hands. He crushed a mix of herbs and pressed them to the wound to stop the bleeding. The scent of mint and willow filled the air. His fingers brushed her skin, which was warm despite the blood loss. For a single heartbeat, she shuddered not from pain, but from something neither of them could name. Ethan worked with care, wrapping the cloth around her side, pressing just enough to hold the medicine in place. He moved with the skill of a man who had done this too many times, yet never with this strange sense of awareness. He could feel the queen's gaze on him the whole time. When at last the bleeding slowed, he sat back, wiping his hands. "It should heal well," he said quietly, "if you rest and keep it clean." Queen Leora opened her eyes fully and looked at him. Her lips curved in a faint smile. "You speak as if rest is a simple thing, Captain," she said slowly. Her voice carried both warmth and warning. Ethan met her gaze, but said nothing. He bowed his head respectfully, though his mind still burned with the memory of her strength, her courage, and the strange mix of fire and grace in her presence. Outside, the wind carried the smell of rain and smoke. Inside the tent, the queen closed her eyes and exhaled. For the first time since the battle began, she allowed herself to surrender to the care of another. Ethan stood quietly, watching her breathe. Around them, the kingdom still trembled from the wounds of war. But here, in this still moment, it was as if time itself had paused. The captain who healed others now found his own heart changed in the presence of the wounded queen. He stepped back into the cooling evening, unaware that this moment, this wound, this act of care would shape the destiny of both healer and ruler forever. The night was quiet around the royal camp, broken only by the crackle of fire and the faint murmur of voices outside the queen's tent. Ethan returned hours later to check on Queen Leora's bandages. He had thought she would be asleep after the long and painful day. But when he entered, he found her awake, sitting up slowly on her bed. The candlelight brushed against her face, softening the sharpness of her tired eyes. She looked at him for a moment before speaking. "You came back, Captain. I thought you would be resting. I could not rest without making sure you were healing, Your Majesty," Ethan said quietly, walked closer, and knelt beside her. The faint smell of herbs filled the air around them. He carried clean cloth, fresh salve, and water warmed by the fire. The Queen hesitated, her fingers brushing against the edge of the blanket. "You will find I am not a kind patient," she said with a faint smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "I have treated soldiers who cursed me every step of the way," he said lightly. "Compared to them, I think a queen will be easy." That small spark of humor seemed to ease her tension. When Ethan lifted the bandage from her side, the room grew quiet again. The wound looked clean but still raw. He dipped the cloth into the warm water and began to wipe away the dried blood with careful motions. At first, she did not move. Then, as his hand brushed the skin near her ribs, she went still. It was not the sharp breath of pain, but of surprise, almost as if the touch carried weight deeper than warmth. Her eyes met his, and for a moment the space between healer and ruler disappeared. Her voice came soft but firm. "Only my consort may touch me there." Ethan froze. His heart seemed to stop for a moment, not from fear, but from confusion. He looked at her, his hand still holding the cloth. Her face was calm, though her eyes carried both fire and warning. He bowed his head slightly. "Then forgive me, Your Majesty," he said, "for doing what is forbidden. But if my hand must break one law to save your life, I will accept that burden." The Queen said nothing. She only looked at him, as if weighing his words. Then, slowly, she leaned back, allowing him to continue. The silence felt heavy, but not cold. Ethan worked slowly, treating the wound with calm precision, though his thoughts tangled like threads. The Queen's earlier words echoed in his mind. "Only my consort may touch me there." He knew it was not just a roulette. It was tradition, perhaps even something sacred among her line. And yet, she had allowed him to continue. When he finished, he looked away quickly, binding the wound again and tying the cloth neatly. "It will heal faster now," he said quietly. "You may feel pain tonight, but it is a good sign. It means the body is fighting to mend itself." Queen Leora watched him. For the first time, the hardness in her face seemed to fade. "You speak of healing as if it is a kind of duty," she said slowly. Ethan met her gaze. "It is more than duty, my queen. It is a promise. If a life can still be saved, I cannot turn away." They sat in stillness for a while. Inside, the fires dimmed as soldiers settled to sleep. Inside, the candle flickered, throwing soft light across the tent walls. The Queen broke the silence first. "You fought bravely today. I saw you help a soldier who could barely stand. You carried him across the field even when arrows fell around you." Ethan's face flushed slightly. "I only did what needed to be done." "That is what every hero says," she replied quietly. Her tone softened. "But not all heroes have gentle hands." Her words lingered in the air. Ethan bowed and began to gather his tools, trying to steady his thoughts. He knew better than to linger too long, but something inside him hesitated to leave. Before he could turn away, she spoke again. "Captain," she said, "tell me, what drives you to fight when your gift is to heal?" He thought for a moment. "Because, Your Majesty, sometimes the only way to protect life is to face what destroys it." The Queen closed her eyes for a moment, as if holding on to that answer. "Then perhaps you understand the burden of a crown," she said softly. Ethan looked at her, unsure what to say. She seemed smaller now, not in strength, but in loneliness. It was the first time he realized that a ruler could be wounded in more ways than one. After he bowed and left the tent, the cool night air brushed against his face. He could still feel the warmth of her skin beneath his hands, her voice echoing inside his mind. "Only my consort may touch me there." Those words would not leave him. He knew he had crossed a line none dared cross, yet he also knew he would do it again if it meant saving her life. In the distance, thunder rolled across the dark sky, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Ethan tilted his head up, letting the rain wash away the dust from the battle. But no rain could cleanse the unsettling pull that now tied his heart to the one woman he was never meant to touch. Days turned into weeks after the battle, and the city began to breathe again. The broken walls were rebuilt, The wounded were cared for, and slowly life returned.
Oh.
Yet, inside the castle, something quiet began to change. Queen Leora's wound had healed, but the memory of the touch that had saved her life stayed deep within her. She found herself thinking of Ethan Cole more than she cared to admit. Every morning she stood before her window, watching the soldiers train in the courtyard below. Among them, she could always spot Ethan. Even when he was not in armor, he carried himself with quiet strength. He was not like the noblemen who filled her council chambers, speaking in circles and hiding behind silken words. Ethan was plain and direct, and something about that steadiness made her feel safe. One morning, as the sunlight spread through her throne room, she called her servant. "Tell Captain Cole I need him," she said simply. Not long after, Ethan entered, his uniform neat, his expression calm. He bowed low. "Your Majesty, I wish to speak with you," she said. And not as queen and subject, but simply as two people who have seen too much of war. Ethan hesitated but nodded. "As you wish." She motioned for him to sit, but he remained standing. That quiet discipline in him did not fade, even in her presence. "You have done much for my people," she said. "Your healing hand saved many lives, not only mine. You speak little of yourself. I wonder what made you choose this path." Ethan looked down for a moment, then spoke. "I was born in a small village. My mother was a healer, my father a guard. When the fever came one winter, I watched her save those who no prayer could help. I wanted to do the same. But when the war began, there was no one left to protect her. She died helping others. I promised myself if I could not save her, I would save whoever I could, for as long as I live." Leora listened quietly. There was no pride in his words, only truth. It stirred something in her heart, a quiet ache she had buried for years. "You speak with such purpose," she said softly. "And yet, purpose has a price. Have you ever wished for something beyond duty?" He smiled faintly. "Duty is the only thing that keeps me steady, Your Majesty. Without it, a man loses himself." For a moment, silence hung between them. The queen stared at him, her heart heavy with thoughts she could not voice. She turned her gaze to the window where sunlight danced on the courtyard stones. "You sound like me," she said finally. "Our duties keep us standing, yet they also keep us alone." That day stretched longer than either of them realized. They spoke of the war, of the kingdom, and even of simple things, the scent of early rain, the call of the birds that had returned after the storm. When Ethan finally left, Leora felt the quiet of the room settled deeper than before. Over the next days, she found reasons to see him again. Sometimes she asked about the health of the soldiers, sometimes about the herbs he used. She told herself it was necessary work, part of rebuilding the city, but she knew it was more. She waited for his calm voice, for the way he spoke truth without hiding behind courtly words. The court began to notice too, servants whispered as Ethan passed in the halls. Some said the queen smiled more now. Others said her smile was dangerous, for love and power seldom walked well together. One evening, as the sun set behind the high towers, Ethan was summoned once again. The queen stood in her garden, surrounded by roses still dripping with dew. The scent hung heavy in the air. "Captain," she said, her voice soft but clear, "do you ever feel that healing others leaves you wounded too?" He looked at her, unsure how to answer. "Sometimes," he said. "Every life saved takes a piece of my strength. But if the pain is mine to bear, it is a fair trade." She turned to him fully then, her eyes deep with something unspoken. "And what if the wound cannot be healed?" He frowned slightly. "And perhaps it only needs tending, not curing." Her breath caught at his words. She stepped closer, her hand brushing the edge of his sleeve. "You healed my body, Ethan," she said softly. "But there is still a wound you cannot see." He could feel the air grow thick around them. His heart beat faster, unsure where the line was, anymore between queen and healer. Duty and desire, care, and something far greater. Before he could speak, she stepped back. "Right." The air seemed to cool again, and she turned toward the castle lights. "Good night, Captain," she said quietly. Ethan bowed deeply. "Good night, Your Majesty." As he walked back through the silent halls, he felt both light and heavy at once. Her voice lingered in his memory, her words shaping something he could not name. In her chamber, Queen Leora stood by the window long after he was gone, the cool wind brushing her hair. For the first time since the war began, she felt her heart racing not from fear or grief, but from something dangerous and alive of feeling that would not rest. The days inside the castle grew calmer, but the peace outside was not true peace. Old wounds in the kingdom began to open again. Some nobles whispered that the queen had grown weak because of the healer who now stood too close to her side. In dark corners of the great hall, men spoke of lost power, of pride stolen by a common soldier. Ethan heard the talk but paid no mind to it. His duty was clear. Each morning he visited the infirmary, healing the injured and guiding the younger healers. Each evening he was called to the queen's side, sometimes for advice on medicine, sometimes only to speak. Those hours had become the quiet center of his life. Queen Leora found comfort in his presence even when they spoke little. She no longer wore her crown in those small moments. With him, she could simply breathe, not as a ruler, but as a woman who had borne too much weight for too long. But the court saw their closeness and did not understand it. One day, a noble named Lord Renner stood before the council. His voice rang loud and proud. "The queen hides herself away with a soldier," he said. "She listens to his words, not to her counsel. She risks her throne for the attention of a common man." Others nodded, hungry for gossip and power. One of the older lords added, "It is said he has touched her, that she no longer remembers who she is." The queen remained silent for a long moment, her gaze firm. "You speak of matters you do not understand," she said calmly. "Captain Ethan Cole has saved more lives than any of you in this hall ever will. His hands serve my kingdom and my people. That is loyalty, not betrayal." Her voice silenced them, but only for a time. Their envy did not die. That night, Ethan was called again to her chamber. The room was quiet, lit only by the dim glow of lamps. The queen stood near the window, her back to him, looking out over the city. The wind carried the cool scent of rain. "They speak against you," she said without turning. He bowed his head. "I know. They say I have lost my reason," she continued. "That I risked the throne for you." Ethan was silent. Then he said softly, "You do not owe them explanation, Your Majesty." She turned then, her eyes searching his face. "What if your presence makes me forget the woman I must be for my people?" He took a step closer, still careful, still respectful. "You forget nothing, my queen. You only remember that you are human before you are ruler." Her eyes softened. She reached to touch the edge of the bandage that still marked where he had once healed her. The scar had turned pale now, almost invisible. "You saved my life," she said, "and yet you have given me a greater wound. One I cannot confess to any soul." Ethan felt words rising inside him but could not speak them. His heart was no longer his own, but he knew where his place was. Before either could speak again, a loud knock came at the door. A guard entered, breathless. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing quickly, "there has been trouble in the outer court. Lord Renner's men have attacked Captain Cole's quarters. They mean to arrest him for deceit and treason." The queen's eyes flared. "Treason?" she demanded. "Yes, Your Majesty. They claim he has bewitched you, turned your judgment against your duty." Ethan's face went pale. "My queen. They are angry men grasping for reason to hate." Leora straightened, her voice turning hard. "Then they will learn what it means to accuse without truth. Bring them to the throne hall at once." Within the hour, the great hall filled with torches and tense faces. Lord Renner stood before the throne, his hand raised as if preaching righteousness. "This man has stolen the queen's trust," he declared. "He hides behind false modesty while seeking her heart. He is no soldier of honor. He is a man of ambition." The queen rose slowly, the light catching on her silver gown. "And you, Lord Renner," she said, "cloak your greed in the name of loyalty." She looked down at Ethan, who stood silently before her, unchained but wounded with disbelief. "You have healed my soldiers, tended my people, risked your life for my kingdom. Tell me, Captain Cole, have you ever spoken false to your queen?" Ethan met her eyes with quiet strength. "Never, Your Majesty. My heart has spoken only what truth demanded sometimes, even when silence would have been wiser." For a moment, all fell silent. Then the queen turned to the gathered court. "You speak of treason," she said, her voice steady but fierce. "But treason lies not in love or loyalty, It lives in envy and deceit. This man has touched no power save the one that heals and protects. If that offends you, you may leave my court forever." Gasps filled the hall. Lord Renar looked around, but found no ally willing to step forward. He bowed stiffly and retreated, his face pale with fury. When the hall emptied, Queen Leora stood motionless. Ethan stepped closer, his voice low. "You risk much for me?" She met his eyes. "I risk everything worth keeping." Outside, the night stretched quiet and endless. For a long time, they said nothing more. Between them lingered not the weight of fear or scandal, but of something unspoken and strong, something neither crown nor oath could undo. The days after the trial in the Great Hall passed in silence. The castle stood calm on the outside, but inside its walls the air was thick with quiet questions and hidden glances. Some courtiers waited for the queen to turn against Ethan, to send him away from the palace. Others waited to see if she would defy them completely and bring him even closer. But Queen Leora said little to anyone. She carried on with her duties as if nothing had changed. Ethan still tended the sick and the wounded. He kept his head low and his hands busy, though deep inside he knew his life had already changed forever. Every time he passed the garden where he had once spoken to the queen, memory rose like a wave in his chest. He told himself to forget, but wishing did not make it so. One evening, not long after sunset, a messenger came for him. "The queen wishes to see you," the man said. Ethan followed again through the dark halls, familiar yet different now, as if every stone remembered the echo of what had been spoken there. The queen waited in the same garden where the roses still bloomed. The night was quiet, the air cool with the scent of earth after rain. She stood by the fountain, the moonlight silver on her hair. When she turned to face him, her eyes were calm but heavy with thought. "You came," she said softly. "I will always come when you call, Your Majesty," he answered. She gave a small smile. "You always use that title, even when we are alone." "It is the only way to protect us both," he said gently. Leora looked down at her hands. "I have thought of what happened in the hall. The nobles will not forget it. Many believe I am blinded by feeling. They may try again to take power from me." Ethan nodded. "Then I will stand ready to defend you." She looked at him then, her eyes clear. "You have defended me already. What I must face now, I must face as a ruler. But there is another truth I must face as a woman." She took a slow breath. "When you touched my wound that day, something changed in me. I feared it, fought it, tried to silence it, but I cannot. You have become part of the strength that keeps me standing." Ethan's heart thudded in his chest. He did not know what words could be safe in that moment. "My queen," he said quietly, "the bond between us was never meant to happen, yet I cannot deny it either. I look for you even when I try not to." The queen stepped closer, stopping only an arm's length away. "If I asked you to stay beside me, not as my healer but as my consort, would you refuse?" she asked. His breath caught. For a moment the night itself seemed to hold still. "If you asked," he said slowly, "I would want to say yes. But I would think first of what it would cost you. The court would not forgive it. Your people might not understand. I could not bear to be the reason they turned their eyes against you." For a long moment they were silent. The sound of the fountain filled the air, gentle and steady. "You speak like a soldier and a healer both," she said finally. Her voice was quiet, almost sad. "You put duty before desire. That is why I trust you." He met her eyes. "And it is why I will always be at your side, even if not as the man you wish." A small tear slid down her cheek, though she did not turn away. "Then you will stand with me still, till my last breath," he said. She reached out then, laying her hand on his arm, and let that be enough. They stood like that in silence, the moonlight soft around them, the roses swaying in the breeze. No promise was spoken beyond those words, yet what stood between them needed none. It was a peace, a bond born not of passion alone but of something deeper, mutual respect. Shared struggle and the strange mercy of fate. The next morning, when the sun rose over the castle towers, Ethan returned to his work among the healers. The people of the city began to speak differently of their queen. They called her stronger, wiser, more at peace. Few knew the truth behind their words. From time to time, the queen would walk through the gardens alone, her eyes lifting to the window of the infirmary, where a healer as quiet shadow sometimes moved beyond the curtains. In those moments, she smiled faintly, not with longing, but with understanding. They both carried the memory of what had been said and what had not. The Queen continued to lead her people with courage. Ethan continued to heal the broken with steady hands. Between them, unseen but unbroken, lived the bond that had begun on a battlefield with a wound and a whisper. The world around them would never speak their truth. Both knew that in saving her life, he had given her something more lasting than a heartbeat. He had given her hope.